Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Happy New Year. We hope 2024 is a year of joy, happiness, peace, love, and prosperity for you and your family. We're excited about our first show of this new year, a conversation with author Jeffrey Blount. His book is called Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way, a riveting tale of one man's journey from a fall from grace to redemption, while at the same time exploring race, poverty, healthcare, housing, and education inequities. And in the end, you will cheer for Mr. Jimmy. Stay tuned. Another View will be right back after this national, regional, and local news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. It's so nice to be back on the radio with you today after a wonderful holiday season. I hope it was for you and your family also. And just because the holiday's over and you think, okay, now I have a chance to just sit and not do anything. Nope, got a lot of activities going on in our area. So let me tell you just about a couple of them very quickly. Next Saturday, January the 13th from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., Her Hectic Life presents Ladies Who Launch 2024. Now, this is an annual conference curated to educate, motivate, and celebrate women entrepreneurs. And one of the featured guests at the conference is one of our guests here in Another View that you are familiar with, therapist Sharice Josie, among others. And they are going to be helping you to this year's theme, is called All Bets on Me, and it is for women entrepreneurs to learn tools to bet on themselves when it comes to business, branding, and juggling hectic lives. And it's going to be held in Hampton at 1997 PowerPoint Parkway on Saturday the 13th. If you want more information, go to Ladies Who Launch, LAUNCH, 2024.com. That's Ladies Who Launch, 2024.com. Lots of things happening for Martin Luther King weekend coming up, including the Virginia Symphony Orchestra, which is going to be doing 2 concerts this year. The first one is Sunday, January 14th at 7 p.m. at 2nd Calvary Baptist Church in Norfolk. And then the following Sunday, January 21st, 2024, at 4 p.m. at I.C. Norcom High School, Portsmouth. Now, both of these concerts are free and open to everyone, but registration is encouraged. Go to vasymphony.org/MLK Tribute and sign up to attend one of these 2 free concerts celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And finally, the Urban League hopes that you will be in the place for the 40th annual Martin Luther King Jr. Community Leaders Awards Breakfast. It will be held on Monday, January the 15th at 8 a.m. at the Virginia Beach Convention Center, located on 19th Street in Virginia Beach. And this event has been going on since 1984, where they award individuals or groups who exemplify service to community, demonstrate the values modeled by Dr. King, and make significant contributions to the Hampton Roads community. I must tell you, I was an honoree one year. It is a wonderful opportunity, and I was so honored to receive this award. The tickets also include a plated breakfast, and this year's honorees, Charlie Hill with the Hampton Roads Prostate Forum, Peter Blake under education. He's the retiring executive director of the State Council of Higher Education for Virginia. Harry Lester, community leader in economic development. Alexis Swain, president, Peninsula president for Town Bank. Norfolk Redevelopment Housing Authority for housing, they're receiving an award. The E.L. Ham Lifetime Achievement Award is going to Governor Douglas Wilder. The Young Professional Member of the Year is Nikita Doggett, and Guild Member of the Year is Lisa Wise Chapman. So go to ulhr.org/MLK-awards, ulhr.org/MLK-awards to get your tickets. And Lisa Godley, our show producer, just told me she'll be in the place, and so hopefully others will join you there, Lisa. So come on out. Our guest today is no stranger to Another View. We first introduced you to author Jeffrey Blount in 2020 with his book, The Emancipation of Evan Walls. And he was part of our series of shows on being a Black man in America. We're happy to welcome him back to Another View with his new book, Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way. Happy New Year, Jeffrey.
Happy New Year, Barbara. Thank you for having me back.
Oh, I'm so glad to speak with you. So I have to tell you this in full disclosure. When you sent me an email, I guess it was back in the summer, and you were telling me about this new book, your new venture. And in your email, you wrote this sentence. And I'm reading verbatim. I'm also excited because my pandemic baby is soon to make its world appearance. Now, I was skimming the email and I stopped and I went, oh my gosh, Gene and Jeffrey have grown children and they're starting over? And then I went on to read the rest of the email. It's like, oh, thank goodness it's a book.
I'm so sorry to do that to you.
I said, that's what I get for skimming quickly and going,
right.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe they're having a baby.
But I do call it my pandemic baby. That it was born then and, had its childhood, had its formative years during that time. So.
During that time. So you started it in 2020. Is that right?
That's right. That's
Wow.
right. And it was about March or April 2020. And I just come off the tour for The Emancipation of Evan Walls. Mm-hmm. And when I got home, I got a call from my publicist, Kathy Bennett, and she said, I hate to tell you this, but the rest of your tour has been canceled because of COVID.
Wow.
And I went to the back porch and sat and started reflecting and thinking. And the next thing I know, I have Mr. Jimmy, coming to the fore in my mind, and I began writing.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about this pandemic baby of yours. What is Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way all about, from your perspective?
Well, Mr. Jimmy is a billionaire, a Black billionaire, of which there aren't many in the United States, and he is a philanthropist, a well-known, beloved philanthropist. He's a big deal in the business world. He's appearing on all the television shows and giving his opinions about the business world. Mm-hmm. And he suffers a fall from grace, a very huge fall from grace, and in an attempt to run away from today's social media and traditional media, he reverts to what is his comfort zone, which is growing up in the rural South. And he finds a town that he figures is so far away from anything that they won't be able to find him. He goes there, buys his house, and then finds out that his house is right next to a neighborhood that is mired in abject poverty, something that he has never witnessed before. Now, he doesn't really want to have anything to do with this because he's got his own problems. He's trying to figure out how he's going to, save his own life in the situation he's put himself in. He's broken his family. He's hurt so much that he's built over the years. But he's drawn into the community. He begins to create relationships, and then there is a monumental discovery that upsets the apple cart in a huge way, and he has to use everything he has to help this community save itself while he's trying to find redemption for himself. Yeah. So the book is about redemption. It's about empowerment. It's about looking at your fellow man and understand the condition of your fellow man and those who have less than you have. What responsibility do we have as individuals, as the village, to reach out to help those people, and what it says about us that we don't.
And, you talk about some really heavy topics in the book, but the way that you weave those topics into the story um, allows the reader to respond emotionally as well as intellectually.
Well, I think, when each one of those things that I do touch on, whether it's housing, education, healthcare, justice, whether we're talking about government assistance in any way or lack thereof, all of those things could probably be a book in and of itself. But I chose this neighborhood because I know that in any neighborhood that exists in this kind of poverty, all of those issues are represented in some measure. And you can think of it like you get up in the morning, if you're parents and you have kids, every child has a different thing happening in their life, and you and your spouse has something different happening in their lives with regard to work and health issues, and all of this stuff is happening in your home every morning. We just don't think about it. But in this community, all of these things are represented. And it gave me the opportunity to show how much people in these situations have to deal with, the lack of that they have to deal with, in a way that I think and I hope is startling to people and will wake people up. Absolutely. And it woke up Mr. Jimmy for sure, because he was living in a whole different atmosphere, which brings up an issue that we know happens particularly within the Black community. And that's the whole idea of those. And that theme was a little bit in Evans Walls, too, where you want to better yourself. You want to move up and out of poverty. Some are able to do that, but yet you still have family. You still have relatives who are in it, and that dynamic of how you balance the two. Absolutely. Well, Mr. Jimmy, there's a part, and I won't give anything away, but there's a part in the book where he comes right up against that. His wealth, and this is before he moved south, but his wealth is put in the face of people who don't have that wealth. And so throughout his life, he has this confrontation of having made it, but then having to exist with, as you said, family and friends and relatives, fellow citizens who have not made it like he has. And, people are jealous of that. People strike out at him because of his success. And so it's a very different situation for, we're not thinking of having sympathy for Mr. Jimmy. He's a billionaire. But as a Black man and in the Black community, and where everybody is struggling to, make it, there's that crabs in a bushel basket thing happening, where if I can't make it, then why should you make it? And why? So where did this whole concept come from, Jeffrey? I mean, I get that you were right in the middle of Evan Walls, which was, I love that book, as you know, but but as you were doing your tour and so forth, and so now you all of a sudden, as the world stopped for all of us, you went home and sat on the porch and went, okay, now what do I do? So where did the idea come from? Well, it was sitting on the porch wondering, what do I do? So I had a lot of conversations with fellow authors who were struggling during COVID, people who had books in progress, and those books came to a screeching halt because whatever COVID was doing to our brains, even before you got it, it was just the anxiety of the situation that the world was involved in, and it stopped people's creative flow. And books just sort of stopped in mid-process. And we talked about that. And I literally had a reflection one day. I'm thinking about this situation. And I think, well, I'm feeling kind of the same thing they're feeling. And, it's even hard to read a book now, to read anything long form. I just don't have the patience or something. So what if COVID just allowed me the opportunity to write one more book? If I could just gather the mental ability here to put together a plot line, and if I could just get one more book out of this, what would it be about? And that meant it had to be something important. If I'm thinking I got one more book left, it has to be something important. And I remember, thinking about my parents and thinking about the idea of the activism of kindness. and how and when I was being raised to be an activist for kindness. In many different situations, our parents put us in to make sure that we were helping people who didn't have the things that we had. We saw it happening, in little ways and big ways in our family. My father was a farmer. He grew an extra large farm. And then after church on Sunday, some people would come over, people I didn't even know would come over and start picking our vegetables in the garden. And, you run to your parents and you say, hey, there's somebody in the field. And they said, that's okay. Let them pick their fill. And then, I learned over time, and I learned over time, and I learned over time after watching my parents do these kinds of things over and over again, that kindness is, as I've been saying, is the biggest superpower. And so that started the process of Mr. Jimmy wanting to write a book about the activism of kindness and how we are tied to our fellow man, no matter what we think we might be, we think we might not be, but we are. And we owe it to ourselves and to our fellow man, human being, to reach out and help when we can.
So is Ham, Mississippi a real place?
Ham, Mississippi is made up, and it is...
Okay, so I'm going to take credit. I'm in the book.
Oh, yes, you are. You can do that. But maybe you won't want to. It's a biblical reference, and it's from the curse of Ham. In the book of Genesis, and Noah curses his son Ham and the descendants to be lesser people. And, many people, and particularly American Southerners during slavery, chose to use this verse or this situation in the Bible to justify centuries of African enslavement, and saying that the Bible says, you were condemned, and you were condemned to be slaves to a greater people. And so that was a way of making it okay to do slavery because the Bible said so. So I just kind of slipped that in there. And, in one of the novellas I wrote, Almost Snow White, there's Canaan, Virginia, and so is Evan Walls is in Canaan, Virginia, which is about the same thing.
So did James Henry Ferguson, that's Mr. Jimmy,
yes,
did he start out in your mind as James Ferguson, and as formally, and then did he evolve into Mr. Jimmy, or was he always Mr. Jimmy, kind of backing into his previous life?
He was James Henry Ferguson first.
Okay.
My daughter Julie and I went to hear. I'm trying to think of the director of the Equal Justice Initiative, Brian Stevenson, speak. And Brian said that, each of us is worth more than our worst moment. We're better than our worst moment in life. And I stopped cold when he was delivering that speech to think about that. And this was quite a while ago. But I carried this with me. Because the idea to write about redemption came from that quote of his. And I wondered, in this day and time, is it possible for someone to run away from social media, traditional media? If you had that scarlet letter, how could you get rid of it? So I was carrying this idea for another book in my head all this time. So Mr. Jimmy, a person who would fall from grace, who would need to find redemption, was in my head, but I didn't know what to do with it until I thought about the idea of my parents talking about, the activism of kindness. And then through many different thought, missions, many days of sitting on the porch and brainstorming, I put the two together.
So what's your writing process? I mean, do you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to get up every day and I'm going to write for 4 hours, or do you just write when it hits you? What's your process?
Well, I don't really have the conventional process because I finished writing The Emancipation of Evan Walls while I was working at NBC News. So I took the opportunity to write when I could. And one of the unique things I did was to carry my characters with me all day long in my head. So when, if I was going to carpool, the characters were doing things. if I was at lunch, the characters were doing things. And then I would come home and I'd have, a sit down where I would just run through typing everything that was in my head to try and put all that down somewhere so I'd have it right to keep up with it. And then I realized that it was difficult to actually write when I wanted to write because I just had so much else going on in my life. But one of the things I love, most people do, is good music, whatever's good for you.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I like to listen to are beautiful soundtracks of movies that I love. And so I would choose a soundtrack for each book. And that soundtrack would be the soundtrack of my novel in my head. So when I would sit down, I would listen to that music, and that music would bring me into the feeling of the book. Then I would read the last 4 pages that I had written, and then I'd start writing. It would get me in the mood, and I'd go right to writing. And I would do that anytime I needed to, whether it was 1 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning, depending on my schedule.
Wow.
So I'm able now to write whenever I want. And I use music and other things as a jumping point to get me motivated. But I don't have to write 4 hours or 8 hours or every day like a lot of people do. I'm just very different that way. I do a whole lot of writing in my head, and then I'm able to sit down when I need to, as you said, to catch up and write that way.
So what was the soundtrack for Mr. Jimmy? Can you share?
The soundtrack? Well, it's actually, Mr. Jimmy was a compilation. So I had a group of them, and there were, let me see, there was, this is going to sound strange, but Gladiator was one.
I can see that. Since I've read the book.
Yeah.
Yes.
So and so I would go from one to the other. In fact, Gladiator, there's a character named Juba in the book, one of the boys.
Mm-hmm.
And Gladiator, there is a character, and the I can't remember the character. Well, the character was Juba in the movie, the black character who was next to the Gladiator, with the best friend of the Gladiator, and he was called Juba, and I love that name. And so, because I'd seen that movie, I went online, I looked up the name, and I found it had some correlation with African kings. And so I thought it would be perfect to give this little boy who was living in poverty this African king name. So, movies and music have a lot to do with my reference points, and help to, create Mr. Jimmy in that way. And my writing process, which is whenever I feel like it.
Yes, now that you have the time, definitely, for whenever you feel like it. So, Mr. Jimmy caused a lot of pain in his life, and to his family, and and then he had pain within himself also. Why was it important to you to show how many different people in his sphere were affected by his actions?
Oh, because one, I needed him to be motivated to leave.
Yeah.
And I needed I needed him to be in such pain. And one way to put your character in pain is to have that character cause hurt for someone they love. Mm-hmm. So he has his wife, he has his 2 daughters, and he and his wife have a very good relationship, a relationship that many people would envy. And what he does causes them incredible hurt, and it causes his daughters incredible hurt. And there's a point in the book where his daughters take him on, when his mother's sitting on the couch and he's sitting on another couch, and the girls just take on their father. Mm-hmm. And you feel how much damage he has done to them. And so that gives Mr. Jimmy the motivation to say, I need to run to find myself. I've done so much damage here. Yeah. I can't fix it in this moment. I've got to go somewhere, find myself, get myself together, and then maybe come back to try and fix what I've done.
Yes, I'm just thinking about that scene in the book. People... Okay, there's another topic I want to get into, but I don't want to
Okay.
start it before I have to tell folks that we're listening to Arthur Jeffrey Blount about his new book, Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way. Call us if you'd like to join our conversation, 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So this community was so poor and so downtrodden that it didn't even have a name. It was called
Yes.
Around the Way.
Around the Way.
And there are lots of communities throughout this country, particularly in the rural South, where they still call it Around the Way to this day.
That's right. And that's why I chose the title. And you're absolutely right. It is so poor, it doesn't have a name, and it goes right into a social description, excuse me, that I wanted to use when writing the book. And that is something that is referred to today as social death. And it's defined by sociologist Orlando Patterson as the condition of people who are not accepted as fully human by a wider society. And so here you have this kind of incredible poverty in the wealthiest country in the world. And we have chosen not to see them. Mm-hmm. And in choosing not to see them, we have made them less than human. And Mr. Jimmy stumbles into this fact that he himself has been, ignoring this. And when he confronts it the first time, he has to run from it, or he feels the need to run from it because it's so overwhelming. And he's looking at these little kids, and it's their norm. And, it begins to change him. But this, I also, Barbara, wanted and needed for Americans to understand that in our country with all this wealth, Doctors Without Borders is operating in our country. Mm. Gene and I just recently saw an ad on television, and I forget the nonprofit, but it was about hunger and feeding kids in our country. Mm-hmm. Now, when we grew up, those were kids in, developing countries where you'd see that. Right. But it's in America now. And there are families living like the folks in Around the Way. And I wanted it to be known that this is the case. And I wanted to wake people up and say, how can you live your life knowing that people are living like this next to you? Mm-hmm. And the kids that I write about in this book who don't have an education or not getting a good education, they were born into this. This isn't something they created.
Exactly.
So we can't sit back and say, well, tell them to pull up their bootstrings.
And it was interesting because outsiders had to be the ones to say, hey, we can work with these children.
That's right.
And it wasn't the community or the people who grew up there, but it took people coming in from the outside to give them some sort of hope.
Well, and there's a point in the book where you get the idea that there is a Christmas dinner where Miss Septima, who is one of my favorite characters, is hosting Mr. Jimmy, and they hint about the circle. That every generation, some kids here along this row of sharecroppers talk about how they're going to get rich and take care of us, and it never happens. The circle just continues, and the poverty just continues, and we just continue to live in these shacks.
Mm-hmm. And even the violence that Mr. Jimmy encounters, again, from the very people that he was trying to help, with Miss Septima's son, and what happened with that, the relationships and the dynamics of both sides of the track, if you will, are just very, very interesting. So I don't want to give away everything in the book because I really want people to read this, but I do want to talk about the white couple that stood by Mr. Jimmy through everything.
Yes.
Now, I took from that they were just good people who hated injustice. But do you think that some people will look at them as the quote unquote white savior and not view it as a positive?
I thought about that, and this is a great question. I thought about that when I was writing it, when I was creating Olivia Faye Carroll. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. I have white people in my background, in my history. Mm-hmm. Even if I go back to high school, John Edwards, who was the managing editor of the Smithfield Times. And I will tell you today that I would not be here as a writer were it not for him.
Mm-hmm.
He gave me the opportunity to be a cub reporter at my hometown newspaper. He gave me faith in myself that I could write.
Mm-hmm.
And that carried me, through college and into the journalism world. And so to have someone who's a professional give you faith in yourself and to support you, to find something in you that they want to help you share with the world is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter to me whether you're white or whether you're Asian or whether you're Latino or whether you're Black.
Exactly.
If you are helping somebody with goodness in your heart to make a difference, I'm not concerned with what color you are. I'm concerned with the fact that you are reaching out and trying to do good in the world. And if we're going to talk about the village can't be the Black village.
Yeah.
It has to be a broader village.
It's got to be the whole village.
It's got to be the whole village. And so Olivia Faye Carroll is, and this is maybe the most important part that we're going to talk about, was created for this reason, so that I could have this conversation. And if you look at the back of the book, when you see the back of the book, those of you, I hope you will buy it. There is a quote by an amazing author, author named Karen White. And she says it takes a village and that doing the right thing should be colorblind. And I knew when that was written that people would, this sort of is in the same realm of what you just asked, of whether something is colorblind or not. And how would people get angry when she said that? But what I've had, Karen read the book and we've talked about the book, and what she's talking about is not recognizing your culture and all of that. Of course, we want to do that. But there are situations in the world where people are, and let me tell you one from my life. So Jean and I and the kids were on 95 driving north one night. And a car, a panel van, a white panel van, starts swerving, turns over on its side and slides over into the shoulder of the road. And all the cars are slowing down anyway once it started swerving. But once it hit the ground and slid, all the cars are now stopping. This is 95 coming to a stop. I get out of my car, people get out of their cars, and I run to this van. I can tell you what I didn't know when I ran to that van. I didn't know whether he was Black or white, Asian, Latino. I didn't know if he was gay or straight. I didn't know if he was Christian, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist. What I didn't know and what all those people didn't know were those things. What we did know was that there was a human life at risk. In that moment, we were focused on the humanity. And that is why we ran to that car to save that man. And what Karen was pointing out is that the village has to be everybody. And in those moments where you will find some of the things that happened in this book, we have to be concerned with the individual's humanity first. And if Olivia Faye Carroll and her husband Yankee were not those people, that they didn't know how to look at those people as human beings first, Mr. Jimmy would have never been successful.
Yeah. And, the fact that they also incorporated their children. Because what I worry about, Jeffrey, as I look at what's happening in our culture and in our world today, the behaviors that are taught, it is so critical that we pass down, like you said, the activism of kindness and the other good things. And Olivia and Yankee were, they incorporated their children to make sure that they were on the same page also. And I worry that there's not enough of that going on.
Well, especially in a time when we are pretending African American history didn't exist.
Right.
And when we are, we're not teaching what we should be teaching. But I do find that there are people who are fighting back against that. And we have to be able to open the door for those people. Mr. Jimmy could have shut them out. Based on the fact that he was in Mississippi, and these were, as he said to her, he thought she was going to be like a junior league woman, and you could tell by the way he says that that's not a positive thing for him.
Exactly.
And so he was ready to we can leave you over here as the real estate agent, and that's where you can stay, until he got to have a feeling about her heart and why she was having the conversation she was having with him. So I believe that there are people who are willing to. I'm trying to think of his name. There is a, and I can't even remember which state this guy's running in, which means I probably shouldn't bring it up. But he is a Muslim who is running for Congress. And I would vote for this man because he is trying to bring a village with him. And every time you see his posts on Instagram, it is about bringing all of us together and all of us to move in that direction. And that is, that is what we're trying to do. And if we go back and we look at the history of even like the Black Panthers, what were they trying to do at a certain point? They were trying to bring together all the poor people. Exactly. Didn't matter what the color was. They were trying to do that.
The focus turned into the what people consider their radicalism and the guns and all of that. But that's not why they were started, and that says nothing about the free breakfast and all of the other things that they did to make sure that children could eat.
Absolutely.
The other piece of this too, and it's almost like I want to talk to you again once the book is actually released and people have read it, because I'm trying not to tell them everything.
Yes,
but
I'd be happy to.
But the other piece too is this whole grasp of power. This last minute, I'll do anything to grasp and hold on to power. That's a theme that you talk about in the book.
Yes, and it is a theme that is replicated over and over again here in Washington, D.C., where I live. And that is one of the greatest issues we have when trying to get people out of this condition of social death. Because it means that you might have to give up a little something to help your fellow man. At a certain point, Dr. King said, what has happened so far, when he was talking about the early part of the Civil Rights Movement and the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, in a way, he said, that's kind of the easy part. But now I'm fighting for economic justice. And this is the hard part, because people are not going to want to give up their power and their money to make equal economic justice. And in fact, it wasn't too long after that where he was killed. So that is a problem that still exists today. And again, the only way as I see to deal with it is to point it out, which is why I'm writing about it and hoping that the conversations will come from this book about this issue. And, the more we talk about it, hopefully we can begin to make change.
Absolutely. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Jay joins us from Chesapeake. Hi, Jay. You're on the air.
Hey, good afternoon, and thank you for having me today.
Sure.
Listen, the young man, the author, sir, I want to tell you, it seems like you've been sitting in the garage with me, stealing my thoughts. And we are on some of the same pages, but I've capsulated my thought in a different way, and it goes along, I think, with exactly what you're saying. My term is be somebody to somebody. I don't care who you are. You never know who's watching you. You never know what example you're setting. Just like when you jumped out of your car in the face of danger on the I-95 accident, you didn't care if that person had 3 heads, 2 wings, or whatever. You were going there to be somebody to somebody.
Yeah.
And I thank you for being on today.
Oh, thank you, Jay. Go ahead.
And Jay, I thank you. And the first thing I want to thank you for is calling me young man. So I really appreciate that. But Jay, I love your phrase, and I appreciate you, and I agree with you 100%. Thank you for calling.
Thank you so much for that, Jay. Be somebody. Absolutely. I mean, because really, at the end of the day, we are all human beings, right? So,
right.
When will the book be released, and where can we find it?
It'll be released January 16th. You can pre-order it right up until that moment, and then you'll be able to buy wherever you can buy books.
Okay. So I want to go back a little bit to your writing style again, too.
Mm-hmm.
How much research do you find you have to do before you can actually just start to develop your characters?
Well,
or do you
there's a
do it
lot
as
of
it
research.
goes along?
I do it as it goes as I go along, because a lot of times the characters end up taking me in directions that I hadn't really planned on, and require some different research in the process. But most of it happens ahead of time. Like, I was asked, well, why did you set it in Mississippi? Well, at the time that I was beginning the book, Mississippi was 46 out of 50 in education. It had the highest rate of poverty in the nation, the second highest obesity rating, and the second highest rate of uninsured, and it just kept going on and on and on. And so, I looked at different southern states as a possible place for around the way neighborhood to exist, and Mississippi came into being because of that. So I researched those kinds of ways. I went because I am definitely not close to being a billionaire, so I had to go to people who had money to talk about how I could get Mr. Jimmy from a small town in Virginia, an African American male, to billionaire status. Yeah, so there was research there. Research about the housing and all the kinds of stuff that would happen. So there's a lot that goes into it. You think that, fiction is you just sit down and you make it all up and you write it, but it's still got to make sense. And people still have to believe that it can be real. So the research is important. So a lot of research goes into it.
So we have a question on Facebook from Zach in Portsmouth. He wants to know if you would share steps that you can take to apply some of the principles that you've discussed. In other words, what actions should you take? What first steps to improve the community?
Well, the first thing I would say is one thing that Mr. Jimmy said, and I don't have a problem giving you this because I don't think it's giving away too much, is that Mr. Jimmy challenges a particular character in the book to say every morning when you get up and you put your feet on the floor, you make a choice from that point. What am I going to do in my day? Now, the state may have failed you. Your community politicians and organizations, your city council may have failed you. Your nation may have failed you in terms of, the situation of social death that I mentioned. But Mr. Jimmy tries to inspire and empower people to recognize that there is power within yourself and what you know and what you have. And it empowers people who have something and the power to do something, like this gentleman's called on Facebook, to go out and find ways that you can help without needing the government, and without needing your local, politicians to help you. How can you help your community? How can you help the children around the way, as I say, in your neighborhood, who are struggling reading, and that they're struggling reading? Can you form a little group where you help them begin to read? Everything doesn't have to be monumental. Exactly. It can be the little things. The pennies add up to make $1. So everything that you see that you can do by yourself to help, do it. And then you can, at the same time, because we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and then at the same time, you can be an activist and you can pressure government to do more. But in the meantime, help people help themselves.
And Jeffrey, it really can be as simple as finding out who the name of your neighbor. Yes. I mean, seriously, people they come and go, they might nod or maybe say hello. And if someone came by and said, who's the person who lives next door to you, they would have no idea.
This is true. This is very true. Yeah.
So we've got to start talking to each other. So what else are you in the throes of getting ready for your tour with this book and so forth, or do you have another book that's swirling around in your head that you've already started researching on?
I have already started researching another one, but right now I'm going to set that aside because I am so happy that I can start my tour on your show.
Oh, I'm so happy that you did.
Yes, this is my official beginning, and then I will begin. I have my next Friday night. The book will launch at Politics and Prose in Washington, D.C., a bookstore, and then I will go on the road, and I'll be on the road for quite some time, and having these kinds of conversations and trying to impress upon people that they need to do what Jay said: be somebody to help, be somebody to somebody.
Absolutely. And I talk often about my friends in Durham, North Carolina, who own Moorhead Manor Bed and Breakfast there, and they have a Monica, the innkeeper, is a part of a book club, and she was asking me for recommendations this past weekend, as a matter of fact, for their book club to consider. So I need to call her as soon as I hang up because I want her to do Mr. Jimmy. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. I've already had a couple of book clubs reach out to me to tell me that they're going to do it, and that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about your son, because I know he's been blowing up in the music world.
Yes,
while the rest of it, let's get the rest of the Blount family. What else is going on? How's he doing?
Jake is doing great, and Gene and I had the pleasure of sitting in the box seats at Carnegie Hall to watch our son walk out on the stage and play in Carnegie Hall in New York.
Oh.
And that was beautiful. He had a great year. He was, he had a tiny desk. He was at the Kennedy Center. I can't even think of all the places that he's played. And he's making some wonderful music. And he's doing, in many ways, the same thing I'm doing. I mean, he's trying to teach about African American history and culture through the music, and what people were trying to say when they made this music about their condition and their hopes for the future. And so he is kind of an activist in that way, and he is also at Brown University working on his PhD.
That's great. And now he's doing bluegrass, isn't that right?
He would say old time music, which there's some separation with bluegrass, but I don't know what it is exactly. And then he's moving into Afrofuturism as well. Oh wow! And his last album, The New Faith, was an Afrofuturism novel, and it's pretty cool, to walk into the Museum of African American History and Culture and see his album there in their store.
That is fantastic, and it's a different genre of music that you would maybe not think of a person of color being in that space, but he is actually talking about African American history in that space.
And he's not only telling you that he's in that space, but he's telling you that much of that space was created by African Americans and taken away from them historically. And so he is trying to be. He's among several other African American artists who are trying to change that story to bring the truth forward.
Absolutely. Okay, you can't leave your daughter out, and you can't leave Gene out.
Well, my daughter, Dr. Julia, just got her doctorate this year, and she's a principal at a school in L.A. and is doing extraordinarily well, and we're very proud of her. She's an incredible advocate for children, and in particular, she worked for several years in Brooklyn at a charter school, and there is a character in the book called Mrs. Ford, who is a young
I was
teacher.
Wondering.
Well, Mrs. Ford is actually a real woman who taught with my mother at a church kindergarten in Smithfield.
Oh,
but
wow.
that's the name. But the heart of Mrs. Ford is my daughter, and what I've watched her do as an educator. And that's why the book is dedicated to both Julia and Jake, because of the things that they are doing in the community to better the community and better everybody around them.
And you. By the way, I meant to say before, you have a sense of humor too with Yankee.
Yes,
with that name.
Thank you. I wondered if anybody else would laugh at that, but thank you.
Yes, I got it.
Yeah, and let me tell you that Jean has been my greatest supporter when it comes to my literary career, and she is, so proud of what I'm doing and so much a part of what I'm doing. But she is in my mind, the finest moderator, interviewer, and on the planet. And she's been, at the Munich Security Conference. She has moderated at the White House Democracy Conference, and many, many more like that. So she's been quite busy traveling the world and also informing people. So we have a family mission to inform.
Yes.
And so everybody's doing well.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic. So what did the kids think? They knew Dad as Mr. NBC and director and documentaries and so forth. Were they going, wait, what are you doing with this author thing?
Well, they know they've known all of their lives that I like to write, that I love writing. In fact, I remember giving The Emancipation of Evan Walls to Jake when he was in high school, and when he finished, he gave it to me. And he said, "Dad, this is it. This is the one." And then I gave Julia was here visiting, and I gave her a digital copy of Mr. Jimmy to take on the plane to take home with her. And this was before even we had sold it. I had finished it, but before my agent Marley Rusoff had sold it. And she landed, and I got a text saying how much she loved the book and how she couldn't wait to talk to me about it. And we did. We had a great conversation about it. So
that's awesome. Everybody's
been very supportive, and my kids for sure would be the ones to tell me if something was not right, or if I was going down the wrong road. They would definitely let me know. They're my truth tellers for sure.
Wow. All right. In the last 2 minutes that we have, if someone is out there and they're an aspiring writer, what would you tell them?
I'm going to give them the same advice that was given to me. Listen. And that was the greatest piece of advice that has ever been given to me as a writer and as a journalist. Listen to the world around you. And the author who gave that to me said, listen to the way people speak. Look at how their body language is when they say what they say, and understand every word you write, that all words are deeper than, as he called it, the superficial meaning you find in the dictionary. And so listen to your environment, listen to your world, and then you can try to recreate that. That's the first step for me, and understand. And that's the first step. That's the basic and the best kind of research you can do, is to really become a part of your world, listen to your world, and absorb your world. And that will make you, I think, the best writer you can be. Because it isn't just about the plotting and the crafting. It has to have a heart, and you have to feel it too when you're writing it. So, as Robert Frost says, if there's no tears in the writer, there are no tears in the reader.
Wow.
And that's what I hope to do when I sit down and do that. I would like to say before we go, the one thing when you read this book, and I hope many of you will, when it's done, and when you close the book, I want you to sit into the good things that happen in this book. We've talked about a lot of the bad issues, but there's a lot of love and joy and fun and happiness in this book. And then I want you to think about this line from the UN mission statement. Every human being is born free and equal in dignity and rights. And I'd like you to close that book and go out into the world and try and make that a happening.
And with that, Jeffrey Blount, we are out of time, but I so appreciate you being with us. The book is called Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way. It will be on sale. You can pre-order it now, and will be on sale on the 16th of January. And thank you so much for joining us for the first Another View of 2024. You can listen to this show again by going to our website, anotherviewradio.org, and downloading the podcast. And while you're there, please sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. Next week on Another View, the Another View Roundtable with thoughts on today's issues affecting us all, and especially the African-American community. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer, and Danielle Saunders answered our phones. I'm Barbara Hamley. Hey, everybody, let's practice the activism of kindness. Enjoy your weekend, and let's get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever. Whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.